Hey, Rock Youth, thanks for joining us for another Friday of Teen Talk, where we're talking about ID, becoming who God created us to be. This week, we are finishing up our high overview of spiritual disciplines and what we learned as we were digging into this reading plan. All right, last day.
It's Friday.
Spiritual disciplines. It's Friday again. Mm-hmm. And if you didn't tell, we're still wearing the same clothes we were wearing last Friday. So we're filming 2 weeks.
2 Fridays.
In 1 week. 1 day. But here we are talking about our spiritual disciplines. We covered a few extra ones. Last week we did the Bible reading, prayer, worship and praise, and fellowship.
Yep.
And those are things, the more we spend doing them and all that kind of stuff, the more beneficial it is over time,
Right.
And so we even asked that time question: how much time do you spend doing these things, and really, what does that show about your heart and who you are?
Yeah, it puts things into perspective.
Right.
When you put a gauge like that on it,
Yeah.
it definitely shows. Okay.
Yeah. Like my example, I was like, I put 25 hours on there times the 480, or divided by the 480, and it was like 0.5% of your awake hours is spent. And I'm like, 25 hours is probably a lot more than most people
I wonder
spend.
if some of you looked at it, you're like, I'm not even going to do that because I don't want to see how embarrassing the number is.
And if you don't know what we're talking about, go back to last week, get into the discussion sheet, the PDF sheet that we distribute through the app, and do that gauge and see where you're at. Because in reality, like we say we love the Lord God with all our heart, soul, and mind, but do we?
Yeah.
And that kind of points to it. But this week, as we dig in, these were different. These spiritual disciplines were different because they're, like you said the other day, they're like
Showing our commitment to the Lord. Like
life stage moments.
honing in more on our paths of becoming more
spiritual markers.
Yeah.
And so we can say I remember the day I was baptized. I was 14. And I remember the day, and that's a moment, a marker in my life. But
Right.
I don't get baptized every morning.
Yeah.
I don't get baptized multiple times. And I've met people that do that. We were actually with a group in Haiti that they were like, "Oh, I'm going around the world. I'm going to get baptized in Jordan. I'm going to get baptized here in Haiti." And that's not what the Bible teaches at all.
It's like a one and done kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just a marker in our life to point back to when the Lord moved in our life in such a special way to save us from our sins.
Right.
Lord's Supper is another thing, just looking at communion and what that is, and but these are some different and weird things. So we're gonna kind of just nix the how have we seen these things happen in our life, because it feels just kind of weird. But what's something that you learned about these different spiritual disciplines this week?
Okay.
Wow.
So a big one for me was fasting. Matthew 6 kind of goes over the fasting,
Right.
And I'll be honest with everybody, it's not something I've really done. I've given up things for the Lord, but really fasting to have good communion with the Lord. I'm seeking His guidance. I'm seeking an answer to a prayer.
Right.
Just really giving up my desires, so that way I can have that moment with the Lord where I can really seek His counsel and and just recently I did this prior to us even getting into this, and I gave up food, and it's awful.
It is.
It's absolutely awful,
right?
Because I love food,
right?
And it's I don't have a lot of vices, but food is one of them,
Right. But I don't even think okay, so I know because we're friends and everything that we both do like food, but I think even for anybody, food is awful to give up.
Oh yeah.
And so, when you actually look at fasting, now a lot of people will go out and they'll say, and I don't think there's anything wrong with this principle, but fasting is really just the removal of something from your life.
It could be anything.
It could be technology and things like that. But when you actually look at the scriptures, it's always food, scripturally.
Because it's what you start out fine in the morning. You're I've got this. This is good. And then all of a sudden your stomach's
So yeah, for sure.
And you're
you're doing that right now.
Yeah, you have to fight through it. But for me, it's not something I really took that. I never really took it that dear to heart. And and the Bible's very clear. Like, it's not something you go around and boast about. It's not something you like. It's a personal thing that you do with the Lord. It's between you and the Lord. You're giving up something for Him, so you can like hone in on something with Him specifically. And just reading through this was it's something that I would like to do more often, because I found it to be it was great. Like it was just something. It just focuses your attention, because it requires a lot of discipline and self-control to do this.
Right. And while that might be true with something like social media or a technology or phone or, some toy you play with or something you have, those things wane over time. Your stomach does not stop grumbling.
No.
You know what I mean? Like if you stop using social media for a while, there's a point where you're like, I'm okay without social media. It's actually nice to not have social media.
Yeah.
Food never does that. Like, you stop eating, you just get hungrier and hungrier and hungrier and tired and exhausted. You get a headache and all these other things come in, and you realize the need and the self-control that it takes to do that. Which is really what I learned this week. So mine was around fasting as well. Just thinking about, God has been showing me from back, I want to say, I think it was in February or something. No, I'm sorry, last fall. Wes was doing a spiritual gifts, or Fruit of the Spirit series.
Oh, Fruit of the Spirit.
You remember that series?
Yeah, it was a great series.
He's doing Fruit of the Spirit, and one of the weeks is self-control. One of the fruit is self-control, and I really began to think about that. Like, a fruit of the Spirit is me choosing to control myself. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, and that's been something that's, since he was teaching on that's been like at the forefront of my mind, is this self-control thing. And then we were talking about reading into fasting and stuff, and I'm like, that's the whole point right there.
Yeah.
It's developing self-control so that, yes, while it's with food, now I can do it with social media. Now I can do it with pornography. Now I can do it because I've developed it with one of the hardest things in the world, food. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
And so that's one of the things I really came to a realization of, like, what is the purpose of fasting? It's controlling oneself in the most primal position.
Oh, it is, because you have people eating ice cream around you or other meals, and you're like, you're in there self-internalizing, like, I have got to exercise self-control right now.
Yeah, I really want that.
I want that.
I'm going to choose the Lord over this, and if somebody's sitting around you on their phone and you've decided to stop using your phone, that might be enticing, but it's not. It's not the same way.
It's not the same.
And so I think that stuff is good and does have a context of fasting. Like, I'm going to fast from those things for a time, but they are not a replacement or anything for the idea that God created and uses scripturally when he talks about food, in the Bible. And what's interesting is it says in that verse 16 that you were talking about, it says, and when you fast. It talks about it as if you need to.
On a regular basis.
And when you fast. Frequently. It doesn't say if you fast. It says when you do. Like, this is a discipline. This is something you do to continually keep your self-control in check.
Yeah. And it's not something that I've done on a
no, neither have I.
It's nothing I've practiced. So there's just a conviction that I've learned.
Right.
I'm like, well, this is definitely beneficial, and especially like you said, and when you fast.
Yeah.
Like, it's not like he's asking you, hey, you need to hone in on this, man.
Right. And this is not something you do to lose weight. Like, it's not like some personal benefit.
Your heart's not in the right place if that's what it is.
It's all spiritual.
Yeah, it's all about your relationship with God, and that's what the focus is. If you're doing it to lose weight, then go eat the donut. Yeah. Because you might as well.
Right. And so I know this jumps out of order for you, might confuse you, but this is also my toughest passage.
Yeah.
Because especially those words right there, and when you fast. Because then I realized, so reading the Bible has become where it's not hard for me. That's just, it's a spiritual discipline. There was a time it was hard for me.
Yeah.
I didn't want to do it. You know what I mean? You have to carve out time, and this is hard.
You do it out of enjoyment because you love it.
Yeah. There's no love here.
In fasting? No, it's awful. I told you it's awful.
There's no love here.
You want to lock yourself in a closet. You don't want any food around, any smells of it. You want to punch the person that's eating in front of you. You're like, I'm going to punch you. So then you have to exercise self-control there.
Yeah. There's no love here. I have still never developed a love for this, and practicing it. You know what I mean? Like, this is suicides.
It is.
and like, it's going to benefit you. You're going to have endurance and you're going to have that self-control when you want to give up during volleyball or basketball. But there's not a time that the coach says, all right, let's do suicides, that you're like, all right, let's go.
You know the cartoon where they'll show like a stuffed animal or something, the eyes all start watering up,
Yeah.
Like that's like the look that I have in my face when I see somebody bite into a cheeseburger.
Oh yeah. That's awesome. But yeah, this is something that you choose to do because you know that it's going to develop you. And you're like, okay, I'm going to go train. And that's tough for me, because again, I'm giving up my control, which goes back to last week's tough thing. I'm giving up my control, saying, okay, I'd really like that over there, but your will be done. It's that same thing, and that's my big struggle, giving up control, I guess, and that's pride.
Right.
That's how I struggle with pride. So, was there something else, or?
Oh, for the tough thing, for me, like since you went over to the tough passage, for me it's really communion and baptism.
Okay.
Because what I ended up doing, a lot of you know my story because you've watched these. If you haven't, go back and watch all of them, and you'll kind of gather my story. But
all like 125 of us.
Yeah, 125 of them
episodes.
But growing up in the church, not really being a believer, I was baptized at a young age.
Okay.
And then I would take communion, and all of it was in vain. Especially when you learn what they represent and what they're supposed to represent, and to
he even says in the passage they read this week, examine your heart, because some of you are sick and dying because you're taking this in the wrong motive.
Yeah, this is not good. Yeah. What you're doing. And
God is punishing you.
Yeah. So for me, what was tough was the fact that I had done those things in vain. For letting other people realize that I am I wanted people to see that I was a Christian.
Pretending. Yeah.
I was pretending at it. It was a masquerade, and so that was tough for me.
Yeah.
Because
I've done that many times where they're passing the plate of communion stuff, and you're like, well, I don't want people to think I'm a mess. The pastor just said, don't take it if you're a mess.
Yeah.
And if I pass these elements, the person next to me is going to think I'm a mess. So I'm just going to take it.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, that's worse.
Yeah, it's bad. It's bad, right?
Yeah, and I've done it.
And when you realize, when you understand, we'll dig into that later on. As we dissect these more, the deeper meaning of what that really represents.
Yeah.
And so it's just in having an understanding of what that really represents and where my heart is supposed to be while doing that.
Yeah.
And thinking about how I wrongfully did it back then.
Right.
That was hard.
Tough to think back.
It's tough to think back on that.
Right. Well, since I threw it all out of order, and it is Friday, let's end, rather than our toughest passage, on
our favorite. Passage.
And on a high note.
On a high note.
Okay. So what was your favorite passage this week?
So my favorite is Matthew 28, the Great Commission.
Yeah.
Because I love the Great Commission.
Okay.
It's my staple verse. It's what I feel like it's where my heart's at. We're going to 19. This is in chapter 28, end of Matthew. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe that all that I have commanded, and behold, I am with you to the end of the age. This is forever my favorite because it's also a challenging thing. It's something I always want to keep on the forefront of my mind.
For sure.
To their lost souls all around us, and am I surrendering myself to the Lord to be used to go proclaim this Great Commission? Am I really every morning I get up, is this what I'm doing, Lord? What do you have for me today? Can I be? Will you use me?
And that goes back to what we were talking about last week. Those who worship in spirit, spirit and truth.
Yeah.
The true worshipers, and you're saying it there is every morning you wake up.
Yeah.
And you're worshiping in the Spirit. It's not this I'm singing songs all day every day. It's literally my lifestyle is a worship.
Yeah.
Everything that you do, because you're just seeking, Lord, how do you want me to serve you right now?
Yeah.
Where I'm at.
What do you got for me today, Lord? How can I serve you today?
Right.
So that's my favorite.
For me, it was an encouraging thing out of the Ephesians 4:16 passage. Because this passage says, he makes the whole body fit together perfectly as each part does its own special work. It helps other parts grow so that the whole body is healthy and growing and full of love. And so, we encourage them and ourselves, and we've just taken them ourselves, the spiritual gifts test, encourage them to do it. But showing, like, the encouragement to me is it shows that, like, we all have purpose.
Yeah.
It's also a challenge, and I guess that's kind of hard, but, it says he fits the whole body together. Each part does its own special work. Like, each of us have a part. Like, that's an encouraging thing.
Yeah.
And helps other parts grow. So, like, you have a part in the body to help someone else grow.
Right.
And that's like, I don't know, having purpose is awesome.
Well, it is awesome because we've talked in the past, like, there's a void that everybody in the world, like, it seems like that doesn't have the Lord. They're searching to fill a void, like, in their heart, like something that's empty, and they fill it with all sorts of crap,
right?
Like garbage in, garbage out,
right?
And that's really what it is. The world is like you're just filling that void with something.
Right,
it's only it's temporal. It's only temporary, and but this here, like, us coming together to fulfill this, like, and have that purpose. It's us having that void filled with the Lord, and He gives us this purpose.
Well, and in that, like, it ends with this, like, challenge. It says, so the whole body is healthy, growing full in love. What you see, though, is, like, God has given each of us gifts, but if we're not using our gifts, then the body can't be healthy. And I think we see that when we come together in community groups on Wednesday nights and different things like that. And, like, you as the leader, me as the leader, like, we run this thing, and the teenagers don't bring their gifts to the table. It's one-sided. It's unhealthy. It's not that it doesn't work. Like, if one person's running the whole show, if Pastor West is the only person doing anything here at the church, this is an unhealthy body.
Right.
Even if there's 15,000 people here, if Pastor West is the only one doing the work, this is an unhealthy body.
Right.
The body has to each have its own part that God has uniquely designed and put in place, and He chose what gifts you have, and then we have to seek what those gifts are and do them.
Yeah, we're not robots. We're
Right.
all created in the likeness of God, but we all have these giftings that He's given us.
And so it is encouraging to me. It's my favorite passage because it gives me purpose. I can say, okay, like, I might feel down and out and not have purpose, but God has purpose for me and gave me that purpose and designed it in me.
Right.
And I think the same for everyone else. You
Yeah.
know? And so that becomes my favorite passage as we look at this, this week. Is just seeing my purpose in the church. And so I don't know, what you learned this week, what you liked, what God taught you. But it's been a couple of weeks of interesting, looking.
Yeah.
Again, this is a very high overview, just looking more at, like, the purpose of each of these spiritual disciplines. But in just a few weeks, we're actually going to start to dive in individually deep into each of these and see how to do them. And interestingly enough, Bible study is always going to be a part of the whole thing. Because again, it's the foundation.
It's our foundation
of understanding each of these disciplines. And so stick with us for the next couple of weeks as we're going to look at where is our focus, kind of analyze where we're at, and then some obstacles that might get in the way before we launch our new series, which we'll just leave you with a teaser about what that's going to be. And you know what we're going to be studying, but we're going to leave you as a teaser of what the name of it is. For just a couple more weeks. So we'll see you in a couple weeks, or see you in a couple weeks. No, see you in a couple days on Monday.
It's Friday. We're going to go.
Ooh.
We have a weekend.
I'm tired. We'll see you in a couple days on Monday as we continue into studying what it means to, where our focus is at with our identity and becoming who God created us to be.